me today. A couple things I really want to clarify. I am not in sales. I've never done a day of sales in my life. I'm a 20-year educator, so I taught for 8 years. Then I was a school principal for 12. And so I'm not here to pitch you on anything. I am here to provide information and give you guys hopefully a really deep and thorough understanding of what Summit Learning is, and more importantly, what Summit Learning is not. Thank you. So I start with this by saying what Summit Learning is. It's a personalized approach to teaching and learning. And I like to be very clear from the get-go that personalized is not individualized, and personalized is not independent learning. Because I think there are lots of misperceptions out there with that word. And so for Summit, which is an entire comprehensive approach to your school design, outcomes for students, curriculum potentially, etc., the idea is that in a personalized environment, every student is operating to the best of our ability within their ZPD. So they get the right resources at the right time to develop the skills and habits we want to develop in them. And for Summit, that is our definition of what personalized is. So I like to start there. Okay. Oh, sorry, yes.
We use different terminology.
Got it, I apologize. Anytime I say something that is not clear, please raise your hand. So ZPD stands for your zone of proximal development, which is the space between what you can do 100% independently and what you can only do with lots of scaffolding. And everything that lives in between is where we want kids to be operating so that it gets higher and higher and they need fewer and fewer scaffolds. And that's our definition of personalized learning, that kids are operating at that time as much as possible. So I'm going to start by doing just a little bit, and if you don't mind indulging me, around like how did Summit Learning even come about? Because I think a lot of people often think it's a tech company or it's a curriculum you might buy or even like a learning management system. But Summit Learning, is there something?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let you fix that while I talk. Summit Learning actually came, literally, it's born by teachers for teachers. And so Summit Public Schools, really quick, was a charter school in 2003 out in California. I'm fortunate enough, I'd say humbled enough to say I was the original history teacher in that school, way back in 2003. And finally ballooned into schools in California and Washington. But in 2007, we graduated our first class of students. And by what we call vanity metrics, so state tests, AP pass rates, equity index rates, college acceptances, 100% of kids, 98% of kids every year are getting into college, four-year colleges and universities, often top-tier schools. By all measures, the school was doing really well, and we graduated multiple classes. We started by 2011, 2012, 2013, we actually had alumni data. And what we started seeing, which was very painful to us, was that about 55% of our students were actually graduating within 4 to 6 years. And it was devastating. Like, some of us had blood, sweat, and tears, pulled kids to the finish line, graduated, everyone got into college, and thought we'd done this amazing job. And we started trying to figure out, well, if we were truly preparing kids for college and career, why are about half of them actually completing college in 4 to 6 years? And that was the impetus for us to really investigate our own practice. Like, what is it that we were not providing students? What are the skills and habits that kids needed in middle school and high school that we thought they had because they got good grades, they got good test scores, they could do school, that then didn't translate into being lifelong learners, etc. So that's the impetus, and I like to tell that because I want people to understand that this truly was born out of a need that we felt that was missing in our schools. Are there any questions about that? Anybody? How many of you in this room are sometimes worried about students who are technically either doing really well, but you're worried that they're not deeply learning? Any of you guys? Okay. I would imagine that there are kids in every school across America that are struggling with that, and that's what we're truly looking to support. A couple other things I like to just share is that Summit Learning is heavily based on research, particularly in the areas of learning science. So what we know today about how children actually learn, we know so much more in 2019 than we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so a lot of the things that you will see in terms of structures or curriculum or learning modules or school design actually live in that space because learning science tells us it's the best way for students to learn. So if you want to do your own research, I pointed this out to other people this morning, please go to what's called the Science of Summit. It's a long read, but it's very easy. It's like a lot of colors and a lot of pictures, and it really connects the dots about what we know about learning science and how we should be structuring and providing support to students. We've also partnered very heavily with just some of the preeminent research organizations in the country. Two I like to really point out, SCALE, which is Stanford Center for Assessment, Learning, and Equity, helped design our assessment rubrics with us. And I'm going to talk a lot more about cognitive skill development and assessment, but a lot of that work has happened in partnership. And the Buck Institute is another one. So I know Ms. Thompson shared that a lot of you are doing projects already in your classes. And so the curriculum is a project-based curriculum where they are aligned to the Buck Institute's model of true PBL, project-based learning. So, but all of these are groups that we work with. Again, just to highlight, it is research-based. We didn't just make it up of thin air, make it out of thin air. Okay. Okay. I'm going to teach you 6 things today. So 3 of them are, what are the proficiencies that Summit is grounded in terms of the curriculum, the design, the components? What do we actually believe that in order to prepare students for college and career in the 21st century, what are the proficiencies that we need? So 3 things. Cognitive skills, and I'll go into each of these more in detail, but it's essential and transferable lifelong skills. So those higher ordered thinking skills, this is the foundation of this program here, is that we are switching from a more traditional content-based outcome for students to a skills-based, and the focus of what we're assessing students on at all times is a competency-based assessment on a set of cognitive skills. The belief being that the skills we've identified through our partners are the skills that are going to make students the most prepared and ready for college and career. Second outcome we want for students in this model would be content knowledge. Content is still very important, right? Kids need to know information, for sure. And no one is suggesting that that's not important. So we believe that an outcome would be that students understand, and the key here is, and are able to apply complex, challenging facts and concepts. And so here's where I'll make a little bit of that connection to the learning science. So learning science tells us that the best way that content is truly mastered, and this, you know this, you guys are teachers, is in the application of that content. And so the projects themselves are where the students are going to demonstrate and be able to apply the content that they've mastered, in addition to some of these online content modules that make up a segment of the program. Okay. The third outcome, and I would say this is the one that is probably it's newer in education, but it's not something that's brand new. I feel like social emotional learning, SEL frameworks and curriculum is probably something we are all talking about. It's definitely very popular in the education world right now. But this habits component. So we believe that through this program, students are going to develop the mindsets and behaviors that support academic achievement and well-being. And again, I'm going to talk about those in a second. But I feel like this is the part that is, I think right now in many schools, unintentionally being delivered to students. But this is a very intentional program design where there is an emphasis on specific habits, specific mindsets, and the specific way you develop those in students. So those are our 3 outcomes. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail. And I have 2 slides for this. But there are 36 interdisciplinary cognitive skills that the curriculum is based in. So every project in every subject, I should say actually like math is a little bit different, but in English, science, and history, all of those courses have projects designed that are attached to a set of cognitive skills. Sometimes 4 skills, 5 skills, it depends on the grade level and the curriculum. But those same skills are cycled and spiraled, which again goes back to the learning science. We know that skills are best developed over time and with lots of formative feedback in a spiraled nature over many years. And so the curriculum itself has these 36 cognitive skills built into it. This is just another way to look at it. There are 7 domains, and for those of you back, I'll just tell you: textual analysis, products and presentations, inquiry, analysis and synthesis, speaking and listening, composing and writing, and using sources. Within each of those domains is then a set of specific cognitive skills that apply to that domain. And all of the history, science, and English projects are attached to these cognitive skills. So it allows teachers, because they're interdisciplinary, to truly collaborate around how do you teach these skills to students, how do you develop them over time, and then because they're in all the courses and all the grades, students have what we call many at-bats. So they have a lot of opportunities through the feedback you give them on their papers or their presentations or the projects they build or the labs they do. You have a lot of opportunities to give them feedback that they can then, when they have another project with the same skill, they can try to demonstrate that they've learned from that feedback. I'm going to do a lot of pausing in this presentation. Any questions about the cognitive skills yet? Yeah. No dumb questions.
So you're saying Summit generally only English, science, and history? Like it's not the other subjects?
So Summit can be the tech tool and the approach, if you will, can be used in any subjects. We have lots of schools who use it in foreign language or use it in their electives or things like that. Which we'll talk about in a second, is that Summit also provides a base curriculum. That the base curriculum comes with English, science, history, and math, but it's 100% customizable to the school, by the school, and expected that the school would actually make it their own in some way. So it can be used in all the subjects. It doesn't have to be. It's a little bit however the school decides to set this up.
Okay.
That's a really good question. Yeah. Anybody else on cog skills? Okay. I mean, also I would just ask you, as teachers who've been doing this forever and are, the experts here, wouldn't we be excited if every student left Centennial actually having mastered at grade level competency many of these skills? Like, I think that's what, as teachers, I can imagine we all want. And our model hopefully helps make this be the focus of what you guys are doing in the classroom. So the second proficiency I talked about specifically was habits of success. There are a myriad of frameworks out in the country right now around frameworks for habits that you can build into schools. Summit has actually tried a variety of different frameworks over their kind of storied history. But in the last few years has really settled on this particular framework, and I'll talk about it, but then tell you for 2 reasons. So this particular framework, which comes from an organization called Turnaround for Children, is based in the idea that habits are malleable. So that, meaning that they can be learned, they can be developed. Sometimes you are really strong at them. There are times in your life where you are less strong at them and need more scaffold and support to demonstrate them. And this framework also suggests that the best way these habits are developed in students is through the relational context of a school. So think of all the relationships that happen in schools. Peer-to-peer, teacher to student, admin to student, counselor to student. All of those different relationships are the best way through continuous modeling. We talk a lot about adults modeling these habits and being very metacognitive or articulate. I am modeling this habit right now, as well as coaching individual students around these habits. Just a couple of pieces. I know it's probably hard to read in the back. The idea is that these are a pyramid that build on each other, but not so much so that once you master the bottom level, you never have to think about it again. So at the very bottom around healthy development is attachment, stress management, and self-regulation. Right? I can think to this morning that I had to, as a 40-year-old woman, I had to really manage my stress management, self-regulation, because I didn't realize from California out here in Utah that when my ice is on my window, putting water on it is not helping the problem. But I was going to be late for Sarissa. So I thought, oh God, now my self-regulation, my stress management is out of control. I'm trying to get the car moving. The point being that in our life as adults even, we constantly flow in and out of these. But the idea here, and you'll see in a second when I talk about the design, is that these are the 16 habits that we are trying to promote in students through our interactions with them, through the curriculum, through our coaching and mentoring of students. Questions about these habits? No? Okay. Okay. So, couple pieces here. So I taught you 3 things. We have outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So, cognitive skill development, content mastery and acquisition, and habits and skills. Those are the 3 pieces we're trying to make happen. They happen through a school has to have 3 components to their school design and their schedules and things like that, where those different outcomes and proficiencies are being developed. So, I'm going to start with mentoring. In this model, every single faculty member is assigned to a set of mentees. So the idea being that every student in the school has a significant adult relationship on their campus. Schools set this up in a variety of ways. Again, I'm going to emphasize as many times as possible that Summit is a vision and an approach with outcomes that you get to actually customize to your school setting, your community, your context, your interests, etc. So there's no single way to do mentoring. Sometimes it's teachers, sometimes it's admin, counselors, support staff is mentor. It's done differently. But the key idea here is that every single student gets a check-in in a perfect setting once a week. I think based on numbers, it's often about every other week, where you get to have a one-on-one with kiddos who are assigned to you. And in the systems that can make it work, those advisees or mentees of yours, you stay with over multiple years. So let's say in the 6th grade, they come in and you're going to start this. Then in the 7th grade, you still keep those same kids. And when they're in the 8th grade, even though you're maybe still a 6th grade teacher, you still have those students and the schedule's designed so that you get to see them at least some parts of the week in a mentoring period, if you will. The other piece I haven't really hit on is a lot of the habits that we're trying to develop are around, a lot of this is around goal setting. And this concept that the word is self-direction. So that one of those habits is really that students are beginning to start to drive their own education in a way that they know what to do when you're not explicitly telling them what to do. They set goals for themselves. They make plans of how they're going to accomplish some of those things. They enact that plan, and then they may or may not achieve it, and they have to reflect on it and set new goals with you as their advisor. So the advisor is the person who's often managing that series of short-term, like daily goals. Today, by the end of the day, I'm going to finish this particular thing. They can be more of a year-long goal or a semester goal. Like, I really want to make sure I get at least B's or better this semester. Often in the high schools, these are much longer-term goals. Like, I want to be able to go to Utah State. I was trying to make sure I actually picked a Utah college. I was going to say UCLA, but I was like, wrong audience. Okay. So the mentor is the person who is doing all of those things. Any questions about mentoring? What that would look like? Okay. One of the things I shared earlier was Sarissa had told me that there's about 1,600 students in the school. Imagine how many of those students in any given week, because the schedule in the school has not been designed intentionally this way, don't have a significant interaction with an adult. And I want to be really thoughtful when I say that. Like, that is not because you are not doing an amazing job, right? Like, you have hundreds of kids coming through your door every day, and you're probably talking to them and assigning things to them and grading them. But, like, truly having an actual methodical, intentional, authentic check-in with them, I would imagine that doesn't happen for 100% of the kids in any given week or any given month, even for some of them. And I'll tell you that a research study came out a little while ago, that said that one of the greatest reasons that students stay in school and find happiness in schools is because they can say that there's at least one adult on campus that they have a significant relationship with. So think about how many students do you have a significant relationship with, and do you truly have time to have that significant relationship? How many of you are probably doing that at lunch or before school or after school because you just deeply care? This is about designing your school in a way so that there's time built in for you to actually do that for kids. What I shared earlier with the families was that, like I said, I was an administrator for a long time in schools. Lucky enough, I've done the mentoring cycle 2 times, so over 8 years. And the relationships I have, and I was fortunate that I had the same kids for 4 years and then a new group as freshmen, 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders. The relationships I have with those students today who graduated many years ago is one of the most profound professional relationships of my career. Like, these are students who, when they were in college, would still call me. I am, happily invited to baby showers and weddings nowadays, and am in regular contact with them. That before I was a mentor, I still loved my kids and I had fun with my students, but I didn't have such a profound relationship with a very small subset. I probably had lots of relationships with way more kids. And that's not to say that in a school like this you won't have those other pieces, but this is really like kids who can rely on you and count on you, and you are really navigating and helping them navigate middle school, which is really, really tough. So that is mentoring. Anybody else? Okay. I'm going to start doing some talking turns in a second. Okay. So the second one I'll do then is self-direction. So part of a student's day is what's called in self-directed learning time. It would be the equivalent in a more traditional setting, like study hall maybe. Like, that would be the image you would have. Unlike study hall, where I think it's a little bit more like there's a supervisor and kids are just kind of like quietly working on things, self-directed learning time is highly facilitated by adults. So it's during self-directed learning time that students are working through a series of online content modules. Okay? It is not the most significant part of the curriculum. It is not the most significant part of a student's day. And I think that is a misperception that sometimes happens, that this is just online school and kids are staring at the screen and like all of that. This is a portion of their day. But one of the things that, again, I think is misperception is that these online content modules, let's pick one. We were just looking at evolution, I think. Evolution was one of them. And it was like a part of evolution. So imagine, I'll show you guys in a second, that students have the topic of evolution. They have some key learnings, some key terms, and then they have a litany of resources through how they could use those, learn those things. videos, readings, which could be like your old textbook, and you just scanned it in and made a PDF of it. It could be interactive websites. It could, whatever we provide you with a base, but maybe those aren't the resources you love. Like you've been teaching, 8th grade science forever, and you have a whole source of resources you like. You can upload them into the system and make this curriculum yours as much as you want. So students on their own, question? Okay. So students on their own are going through these online modules, trying to learn that information. When they feel that they're ready, they signal to the facilitator of SDL time that they're ready to take a content assessment, which is a 10-point multiple choice question. I'm going to pause for a second. So a couple things. No one at Summit believes that a 10-point multiple choice question is the most sophisticated way to assess learning. And I think, again, that's a misperception. The primary purpose of these online content modules, learning content is by a close second, but the primary purpose is to provide an experience for students where they have to practice those habits and those skills. That is the primary purpose of that segment. So students have to set goals. They have to actually make plans for how they're going to learn something. They have to be self-aware enough to know, I want to watch a video all the time, but that's not working for me. I actually need to do some of the readings. And these are some of the conversations that mentors have with students when they see through the digital platform, you're not passing any of these. You're not making any progress, and we need to investigate what is going on. There's lots of ways and lots of information the supervisor gets around what kids are doing during that time. The other piece I would just say is, as a teacher, during self-directed learning time, you are using the data you have to support students. So, and I was sharing to the moms earlier that I am living this reality as a mom myself. So I have an 8th grade boy who I love dearly, but is giving me a run for my money, just be honest. And he is doing an after-school online math class. He does not go to a Summit Learning School because of where we live. There isn't one. And so I'm watching him try to do this online learning program, and he's a good student for all other ways. He gets pretty good grades. He can do his homework if the teacher tells him what to do, and he turns on the worksheets and those kinds of things. But watching him try to take control and have agency around learning something without the teacher directly spoon-feeding him the information, he doesn't know how to do. And I was terrified. About 2 weeks ago, we had a moment where he's just blankly watching information, and I was like, well, do you have a notebook? What are you doing with all this information? Are you taking notes? And he had no idea. And what I realized is he's not learning that in his more traditional school, how to have agency around how he learns best, or what he needs to do to get information, because no one's directly telling him. So I am now taking on the role of what a Summit Learning teacher would be, and I'm teaching him some of those habits. So I want to be really clear, you don't at the beginning of the school year just put kids on the computer and say, whew, there's your online module, click into it. You have to highly scaffold this, especially for middle schoolers. Do you know how to read an online resource and do something with that information? Do you know how to take notes on it? Have you figured out how long it's going to take you to get through this and set a plan? How many hours are you going to work on this week? All of those skills, we have to explicitly teach students when they do this program. So again, the self-directed learning part of this is, yes, to learn content, to work through these content modules, but the primary purpose is to create an environment where there are multiple opportunities for students to practice, get feedback on, both from the computer when they don't pass something, but also from you as the person who's supporting them as the mentor, or the classroom teacher, that they need some feedback on some of the habits and skills they need to develop in order to be more successful. Okay. So that is self-directed learning time. Mostly habits and content. Anybody else? Oh, yes.
So my question is Summit Learning, is it kind of like Canvas, where the basic shell of a program? That's not what I mean, but where it's kind of the framework of it, has the tools, the teacher creates all the content and kind of plugs it into the system, like, it's like a way for them to turn in things? Or is it where there's like pre-created content that you're using, but you can also customize it? Like, I'm just having a hard time picturing what it is and what it does.
Yeah, so it is, I don't know what did you say, Canvas?
Yeah, so Canvas is like a program we use to like create a site.
It's like a Google Classroom?
An LMS.
Yeah.
Got it. Summit is not an LMS. It is definitely not that. But it could be either or in terms of a curriculum that's uploaded into it or teacher created. So we provide a curriculum that is project based and has it has the projects, it has the content that's attached to them in the right modules, has all the different pieces to get the project done. It comes with daily lesson plans if you want to use it exactly as scripted, all of those pieces. But what we usually expect from schools is that they make it their own. So what subject do you teach? English. Do you have a favorite book that you teach?
Yep.
What is it?
Diary of Anne Frank.
Oh, well, great. There's an actual Anne Frank project in here. But let's say there wasn't an Anne Frank project, and this is a project you like, a content you love. You could use some of the base curriculum and then say like, oh, there's a it's called Story to Screen project. Maybe you want to do Anne Frank. And you're going to look at, like, here's the story, here's how it's made into a movie, and there's some compare and contrast skills in there, etc. But you get to, if you wanted to do your Anne Frank project, whatever it is, the thing you would have to do is you'd have to convert it into the project, like, template, which is pretty easy on the tech side, literally. It's like a lot of clicking and dragging. But one thing is you would have to associate cognitive skills to it. So all of the grading and assessment is on cognitive skills. So you can't build in like a participation grade if you wanted to, or like an extra credit grade. Literally, let's say your Anne Frank project has argumentative claim, it has, thesis, which probably I wouldn't have both those together, story arc, whatever it has in there, writing structures, you would have to attach it to those and then agree, like, okay, I'm going to assess these cognitive skills for this particular project. That is one thing you do have to do, is tie it to cognitive skills. Does that help?
A little bit.
Yeah.
What standards are the curriculum built off of?
Yeah.
State or whatever?
Totally great question. It is Common Core. So it is Common Core standards as well as NGSS. So I would say that in the elementary, which wouldn't necessarily apply here in Utah, but because it's born out of the California schools, there is in the elementary years, there's a California state history course that often in other states they have to turn it into like an Arizona state course or an Alaska or a Kentucky. But there are pieces that are built off of California for some content at the lower grades. But in general, it's a Common Core crosswalked curriculum.
We're still following our desk in our state.
Yeah.
We edit it down to follow what we do here.
Okay, so we would still be operating on our current standards.
Correct.
Yes. Like we're not here to push any particular standards on you. The support we provide is helping your team do the crosswalk between what your district's standards are and what's in the curriculum, and like an audit almost. So what is extra that you can take out, or what is missing, and then how do you build that into existing projects, or potentially have to design a particular project that you need to do. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any elective curriculums built in, like art?
Yeah, so those are in creation, I will say. But here's one of the things. So when you become a part of Summit Learning, you actually, if you want, I should say, you join like the national community. So right now there's about 380 schools across the country who are in Summit Learning, but in all types of schools, elementary, middle, high, like all over the board. And you can, and there's a ton of sharing amongst that national community there's a few avenues that we support in how to share curriculum. So Summit might not provide a cooking, let's say, curriculum, but there's a middle school in Alaska who is doing that, and you, on your page, you can mark, like, I'm willing to have my curriculum I've developed available in the library. And so then you can go and find other schools' curriculums that you might want to use for electives if you want. Yeah. Great question. Yeah.
So one more question.
Sure.
So you said you have to have a cognitive
Skill.
skill or standard.
Mhm.
So the cognitive skill almost overrides or trumps the Common Core standard that you have?
Yes. In the sense that the projects and what is being assessed in them is aligned to Common Core standards. But you wouldn't see in the curriculum, like this particular Common Core standard, you would see the cognitive skill that needs to be developed. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's trumping it. I would say is that we've thought about pretty intentionally what are all the Common Core standards and what needs to be mastered in a particular grade level or a particular area, I should say. And when we do the crosswalk, if a student were to take all of these projects in 7th grade, are they going to have had experiences to develop all of the skills that are required by Common Core in the 7th grade? Does that make sense? We also have a lot of documents about this. So, like you can see the alignments we've done between Common Core and all of the projects in every course in every grade level. So I can send that to you. It's a bulky document, but you can see the overlap. And then like Ms. Thompson said, if your district, it sounds like, has its own set of standards, like that is work you guys would need to do just to make sure that everything that the district is asking, like you're still doing, you're not like reinventing the wheel here. Yeah. These are really good questions. What else? Okay. So I'm talking about projects is the last thing. So we had our 3 outcomes: cognitive skills, content, habits. How does that happen? Mentoring, self-directed time, and then projects. This is the bulk of it, guys. This is traditional. First period English, first period science, whatever. You have a series of projects in every course. I'm going to show you what a project is so it makes sense to you. This is the one I was just talking about. So this is a real 7th grade English project. It's called From Story to Screen. And it is loaded into the system for you and has as much as you want to use, and then you can even add on to it, or like I said, you can build your own projects, and we support you in doing that. It tells you the project overview. So for this particular project, the essential question would be, how does the impact or power of a story change when it is in a film versus in a written story? All projects result in a final product. So a final product would be, there are 2 here. They have to do lit circles. Are we familiar with lit circles? Okay. I just want to make sure. Parents, I missed the mark that they didn't know what that was. And then it's really a compare-contrast essay where they're going to actually read a book in whatever the choice. They get lit circles in the class. And then eventually they're going to watch the movie of their book, and the essay is going to be a really demonstrating the skill of compare and contrast for how the story changed from book to screen. So all along the way, and again, this is what I like to tell people, this is what you're already doing, right? Like if you're trying to get kids to an outcome, there's a series of steps along the way. In this case, we call them checkpoints. So in order to get kids to do a final lit circle that you're assessing, and a compare-contrast essay, there are 4 steps along the way, these 4 checkpoints. So step 1 is around the lit circles themselves. Kids get into groups, there's work they have to do, there are resources, there are activities. So I'll just pop in here so you can see. Okay. One thing you'll also notice that it comes with are plans. So if you want to just cookie cutter, use our curriculum, we've given you the daily lesson plans. If you want to kind of use it, we also say probably look at it. It gives you some good ideas so you're not starting from scratch. It's like to help you save time. But there are checkpoints along the way here. There are resources that kids use. And again, this is not independent. You as the teacher are facilitating all these things. Just like you might be giving a lecture. Like that's like what you would do in your normal class. Kids might have 20 minutes of in-class reading time. Then you're going to put them into small literature circles. Maybe you gave them a piece of paper. We still use paper in Summit. Like maybe you gave them a graphic organizer where they're starting to get prepared for their discussion with their book group. Like all of the things you still do, it's just loaded into the system. And you are deploying, like giving out resources to kids electronically. So they do all these checkpoints. That was just one example. And again, imagine you're trying to get kids to write an essay. Checkpoint 3 is they have to write an outline. They have to do a draft. Like again, these are all the things you're doing. Kids are supporting it, or kids are delivering it back to you. And the system itself, the platform, allows you to give a lot of feedback to kids in very easy ways. So a lot of this is if a student submits something to you and you're just looking at their outline, there's a lot of color coding here, so it's a red, yellow, green model. So you can just click red, yellow, green, like, yep, if you want to do minimal feedback, because that's what makes sense for that assignment or your life. 2, if you want to do more extensive feedback, let's say on their draft, and the cognitive skill you're assessing happens to be their thesis, you can actually go in and do like Google Comments and things like that, because it's done through Google Docs. And you're assessing and giving a lot of feedback on every kid's thesis, and then giving it back to kids. On your end, and I'll do more of the platform in a second, you get all this data, basically. So you're getting all the information about what kids turned it in, you might not remember how many kids got reds. So you inputted it, you've given feedback over the last couple of days, and now it's Wednesday, and you're thinking, oh, no, I don't remember. Like, here are my quick kids, here are all the reds. They need support with the argument of claim. So I'm getting everyone else moving, but I'm going to pull this small group, and I'm going to actually give them some more like direct instruction on how to write a better argument of claim. Maybe they didn't get it the first time. So that's how, like, when the kids put in the information, you as a teacher, once you give them feedback, just have a lot of data at your fingertips that you may not have previously had. So, okay, this is what projects look like. Again, kids are being, bless you, assessed on those skills, and every project is attached to some subset of those 36 cognitive skills. Those skills come up in science, in history, in English. We haven't talked about math yet. And they're the same ones they see in 7th grade, in 8th grade, and in 9th grade. The rubric, though, looks different. At every grade level, it gets more advanced. So it sounds like you're doing some sort of competency or standards-based grading anyways. What does grade level cog skill look like at 9th grade, at 8th grade, at 7th grade? And kids start getting very familiar with the rubric. Like if you were to walk into Farmington High School, you could ask pretty much any kid and they would say, well, I'm currently getting a 4. Like I'm a 4 right now. I need to get to a 5. Like they start to use that language around knowing where they live on competency-based rubrics. And it's pretty cool to actually talk to them and ask them in a way that they're cognizant of where they stand when they may not have in the past. Okay, comments, questions?
So some of these 0 through 5, not ABs in the traditional way?
It's interesting. No, all of those numbers correlate to an A, B, C. Like we live in the external world too. Like you have to report grades on transcripts and like to colleges and things like that. So every grade level has a number that correlates to an A, a B, or a C, and then students know that too. Like there's like a direct line. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Anybody? Okay. Turn and talk for 30 seconds. What is a question you have right now about anything I've talked about so far? Okay, where should I go? Oh, Lord. Okay, should I do the platform or what is like the training?
I think just go over this and what it plays in the process and then dip into the platform.
Okay, so the concept is like how to apply and how to use it in school.
Yeah, and just like what the training per se.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to bring us back together. Is there anyone who wants to share something they talked about? A question you have? Yes.
So, with Summit and its kind of system of giving the feedback up with rubrics, is that just for the summative, or is that also for formative?
Both.
Both. Is there options to leave it to kind of leave the formative to where there's descriptive feedback for kids, but they are not seeing the numbers on the formative, because I know that a lot of standard cases move away from giving students numbers or things. So there's a way to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, for sure. Okay, I'm going to move this really quickly. Just a couple. Someone else? Did you?
No, I'm just looking at that.
Oh, okay. So really quickly, again, I just wanted to give you like a vision of what a school could look like. It doesn't have to look like this. There's probably 100 different samples out there. When I talked about kind of how you redesign the school day, dark blue, projects. This would be a student's schedule, if you will. And it usually often moves to a block. It doesn't have to. We have a lot of schools who still stay like a 50 or 55-minute period. A lot of schools will move to a block, though, because it's easier to do the project in a block. So dark blue would be when kids are in their project times. Light blue is self-directed learning time. So that's when they're working through those online content modules. Orange is mentoring time. For the class is essentially still doing self-directed learning time. However, you as the teacher are not facilitating and helping kids through those online content modules. You've actually said when it's mentoring time, I have my mentoring like station in my classroom, and I'm pulling kids back per appointment. Okay. These greens are a school that has a population that has a lot of foundational needs. So they have like a remediation period through the day. That it's not like the Summit program, they're doing their own tools around remediation. This could be where you guys have electives or like there's so many different configurations. But I just want you to have a vision. The idea being that about 70% of a student's school experience should be on projects. It's the teaching. It's like the thing you're doing. You're doing the thing you do. About 30% of the time is spent in self-directed time with mentoring. It doesn't have to be this way, but the original design also was that the homework is self-directed learning. So the volume that kids have to get through cannot be accomplished at school alone if you just adapt our base curriculum. So homework is often they have to work through those online content modules in addition to during the school day. For the most part, project work we try to keep it done during the class time. And that, that's a whole other conversation, but just to give you an idea. Okay, I'm going to move us really quickly to a couple things since I know we're running out of time. Is just the program itself and like what happens now. There are 4 components to the program. Okay, professional development is a huge part. If you join Summit Learning, there's a lot of professional development that you get. So it's in person, meaning we come to you often. I've been to Farmington. This is my 4th time. I actually am beginning to love it here. I don't know how you focus, I was saying. That is the most beautiful view literally ever. You probably take it for granted, but I would stare out the window all day. So we do on demand. If you're having a real crisis, whether it's our community doesn't believe in this and we need help, a parent night, or a particular teacher just can you please model what this looks like? I need you to model it for me. We send someone and we partner with you for a couple days. It also looks like trainings. So in the springtime, if your school is thinking you want to do it for the next year, we work with you in the spring to get your school ready for this. There are what we call site level conditions that need to be in place that make the launch of it and the implementation strong. So we work with you in the spring. In the summer, there is training. Everyone goes to a week-long training. They're all over the country, so they're regional. And then you go to the one that makes sense to you. We like teams to go together. That's like the PD component. There's just like a lot of ongoing support. So not myself. I actually am the manager of a set of coaches. You have a coach assigned to your school who meets with teachers or school admin, depending how it's set up, at the beginning of the year, sometimes weekly, but then for sure at a minimum every other week for an hour, and then you can get whatever else you want. That's like the bare minimum. So curriculum and assessment is something that comes with the program. Again, most schools adopt the base curriculum year one just because they're learning like new pedagogical approaches and a new tool and all these pieces. It's a very heavy lift sometimes to build a whole new curriculum. So they usually adopt most of the base and then add it to make it feel more like their own. They don't necessarily start from scratch. And then the platform itself is the actual like tech tool. And I've purposely not spent a ton of time on it. I'll show you the tech tool right now. But the reason I don't spend a ton of time on it is because I want you to walk away thinking about Summit Learning is not a tech tool. A tech tool is a support for Summit Learning. It's a tool, but this is a whole comprehensive vision for a school. We want our students to focus on skills. We want them to develop habits. We want to have mentoring and significant adult relationships with kids. Like, it's a whole comprehensive approach that the tool supports. Any questions about that piece? Okay, then I'm going to show the tool at the very end for a few minutes and give you a demo account that you can play with as much as you want. I also want to be really clear. You know, I'm fairly certain a lot of you know how Farmington did this. They went whole school, all in year one. Okay? Some schools do that. A lot of schools do a slower roll-up. So you pick a small segment to start, like for teachers who are like really excited and like gung-ho, or it's just like the right conditions for them. And then they're going to be like year one. And then as we learn and get better and like we figure this out together, it grows. Sometimes you'll see a grade level. That's like, I think probably one of the most common is you might just do all 7th grade is going to do this because we don't want to change things for kids who are already here. It's like they're coming into our school for the first time. This is just how Centennial does school. The change is a little bit harder, right? So sometimes it's like your school and you guys, it sounds like a really tight community. You get to pick like what this looks like. We support you in whatever you decide and help you figure it out. Okay. Any questions about that? Great. Okay, last one here is the platform team. Okay. So write this down. It's demo dot summitlearning.org. I would encourage you, like, truly check it out. There's a lot of bells and whistles, and it constantly gets new features added to it because of people like you. So there's a very robust feedback system that almost all the features that we get are because teachers have said, it would be really great if, literally, instead of me like giving kids a lot of comments, you could just add a red, yellow, green button for a checkpoint that I just need them to know if they need to do it again or move forward. Like, that's a feature that got added because teachers asked for it. So a lot of the things shift all the time. That's not true, actually. Some new features are added to make things better, but it comes from the population of teachers. We're not the ones dictating necessarily, like all the new interfaces that happen or the new bells and whistles. Okay. So when you go into the demo, you can view, there's two interfaces. There's the teacher interface and there's the student and parent interface. Okay. I encourage you to actually play around with both, to be honest. Let's do a history teacher. I'm going to highlight, because of time, like I think probably the most important feature of the tool. So this teacher teaches Modern World 1. Here's their mentoring tab. So it has like your mentees listed and all of their information and the goals that they set and all those pieces. Here's how you might group students in your school so you can get students housed in certain ways that you can get specific data for that group of students. Tons of educator tools. All the resources you might want about curriculum or the rubric, or I don't know how to assign a project in here. Like all of that stuff lives in here. And then your curriculum tab, which is like where you can look at all the curriculum available. But what I was going to say is I think this is the most powerful piece. So when you open your course, again, all of your curriculum lives in here. But I think the one that really impacts how teachers are teaching is your student classroom data is very live for you all the time. And it gives you a ton of information that you would be using on a regular basis to inform your instruction and how you're planning your class. So it tells you at any given moment, obviously, like who's passing your class and who's not. Like right now, of his 30 students or her 30 students, 11 teachers are passing. It also tells you the COG skill average, like how are these kiddos doing on their COG skills? And as a teacher, the way you might use this, okay, is to look at, okay, those are my high flyers. Again, it's very color-coded, okay? These are my kiddos who are struggling a little bit, but they're doing okay. Orange means they're still passing, like they're in the C range sometimes. Here are my kids that are really struggling. So, and you click, everything's a click in for more details. So if you were to click into the COG skills section, it would break it down by COG skill. And you would see, oh, this particular student on modeling, so that was one of the COG skills being assessed, these kids all don't have passing scores on modeling. And this is from old projects. So we're now in February. You assessed modeling before in the year, maybe 2 times. That's the 3rd time you're assessing modeling. These kids are still really struggling with modeling. You're going to use this information to say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do an intervention here around modeling. I'm going to pull the small group. I'm going to do what's called a small group workshop to figure out, like, why are these kids struggling with modeling? Like, what are the additional scaffolds I'm not providing them? What do they need, etc. So this is the place where a lot of your teacher decisions are made because you're being very responsive to data around how to teach the kids in my room and bucket them. Yes?
So if all of the subjects are using the same cognitive skills grading off of them, is there a tool that allows you to look at their overall modeling score? Like you said, maybe you haven't assessed it since like October and it's now February. Yep. But their math teacher has. Is there a tool that shows you their modeling overall in all their classes?
No, there's not a tool that says on average their modeling score is X. But one of the pieces about this is your community has to get very comfortable with all the data is public for the school. So maybe you and what department are you in? So let's say you and the English teacher are paired. You have the same group of kids, let's say. You could go and you can you don't log in even. It's just in those student groups, actually. You can actually see those kids, how are they scoring in modeling in English. And then part of this, when I talk about school design, part of the PD is around, this requires, and it's just better when there's a lot of teacher collaboration and the school systematizes ways to have teachers have prep together, or like a weekly meeting or a bi-weekly meeting or whatever it is. But ideally, you and the English teacher would regularly sit down, because let's say you have the same kiddos, and say, God, these 10 kids, both of us can't seem to figure out what to do on any of these cognitive skills. What are you going to do? What am I going to do? But it allows for a more seamless ability to see how kids are performing in other classes to help inform where you're going to support, where someone else might support. Yeah. Okay. I'm 1 minute over. You guys have been amazing for staying. I really appreciate that. I'm going to stick around. So I know lots of you have lives and things you need to do. But I'm here. I can keep going. You guys can get up. Like, anyone? Oh, I don't need that. But
So
like I said before, this is a piece of the information we're gathering. We are going to make a decision by March 1st because that's the application deadline for this program. So there will be lots of emails. There'll be lots of conversations between lots of department meetings. You guys still have all that stuff we should be doing between now and the next meeting in March, PLC leaders and department chairs. This probably should be a piece of that conversation. There will be a survey that goes out in a couple weeks. So remember, the reason we're looking at this is because what our kids next year will be going to and be using, and is it something we should be supporting? So thank you. Have a great weekend. See you later. If you want to ask specific questions, she's going to stay.
Can you show math?
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. Yeah. So here's the big difference with math. I'm so sorry. The poor math folks in the room. And I can make sure Sarissa has all the information. The difference here is that math is a little bit more traditional, to be honest with you. So versus the projects culminate in this like big thing that kids turn in on a certain date, but they have a lot of opportunities to like make it better and things like that. The math units, they're called concept units, so they're not projects. Their final product, if you will, is a on-demand performance assessment. So it's actually a test still. Like, here's the unit.
On the computer?
No, on paper.
Oh.
It's definitely on paper. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen one on a computer. They're like very like exams. So
It's produced by Summit and supplemented by us.
yeah, for anyway. I mean, I think the big difference here for math, and I can show you actually.
Yeah.
The big difference for math is that, there's still the focus on procedural fluency and not just conceptual application, if that makes sense. Here, let me. Are you guys math folks too? Okay. Do you want to come smaller or? Oh, okay. I'm gonna take.
Yeah, you can write
How do I
down.
do this?
Mic up.
I'm sure everybody wants to know about this.
I like the idea of the project-based stuff.
Yeah.
I just want to know how it, what they have to do to get to that.
Yep. So there are. I'm trying to think where. It's like so much I could. Probably should just like do a call you guys to a math like. But let me show you. Let me show you a math project so you can see what a math thing looks like.
There's the.
Hey. Amanda.
I mean, you don't have to.
You don't
over
have to
here.
come, but
You're just doing math stuff.
if you want to go. I saw agencies.
So this is like in the curriculum library. So let's shoot to accept.
Yes, let's do.
You would want that.
Of course.
Okay, so here's a map.
I don't want anything but.
You should be really interested in this one.
I should be. I just want to survive this year and never have to deal with it.
Okay. So again, this is aligned to like Common Core standards. So here would be a math unit, the first one of the year, which is called Introducing Proportional Relationships.
Great.
The math concept, because they're called concept units, are proportional relationships. So the framework is similar in terms of how you would do it. And the structure of a concept unit is a little bit more of like, I do, we do, you do, in terms of, there is still like a lot of robust problem solving. And so this is an end of the unit assessment where it's an on-demand test for all the concepts that should have been learned in representing proportional different tables with equations. All of these pieces then have, if you will, these different resources. So a lot, again, like I said, it's a lot of, you unlock them for students and then you print, it's a lot of paper-based. Math is still very paper-based, actually. Like you're teaching a concept there is a lot of group work in the way that math is structured. Within every math unit are what are called portfolio problems, and I think those would be the closest akin to like a project. They're like deep, rich, multi-stepped projects that pertain to this. But you can kind of do it at any point in the concept of the unit that makes sense for you. So kids are kind of getting more traditional like math lessons or doing problem solving. That's a lot of like the numerical fluency.
This is not something they would do on their own.
Portfolio problems they would do in class time. It's like often group work. So here, let's look at a portfolio problem.
I was looking at like those resources for everyone.
Oh,
whatever.
those are done in class.
Those are like lessons we would present.
Lessons you would present.
So it is not individual.
Not at all. It is highly. Well, do you mean like kids are just working on their own
Right.
themselves?
Yeah, self-paced, I guess.
No, not at all.
Self-paced at all.
No, I mean I think there are parts of the curriculum that are self-paced. So even in math, so let me go back to the demo.
So what I'm trying to do is wrap my head around what would I do in class time with students, and what would they do during their individual time.
Yeah. So you would do in math, you would present a lesson.
Which would be those resources, basically.
Yeah, like it's a topic you're presenting on. You're gonna do some modeling. A lot of stuff you would do. I think the format of math is different in there's a lot of emphasis on the facilitation of what's called the cool down. So the cool down would be like you've done your lesson, you've given kids like a worksheet, or they're learning something. You're circulating, giving them feedback. At the end, you pull the class together, and there's like a protocol we teach you in order to elicit the students to share what they were thinking. Like, how did you solve this? What were you thinking? And it's kind of bouncing around the room to get kids to share what they learned. That's like a very common practice. Like, I'm going to present the lesson to you. You're going to have some work time. I'm going to pull us back together to like close this out through a Q&A that's a lot more facilitated by the adults. Now, at certain points throughout the math unit, so I'm going to show you the students.
Keep it at home.
Here is math. Kids, so they have these, they say projects, they're concept units. They have power focus areas still, and this is a lot of just problem solving. This is what they do for homework often. Is like whatever power focus areas are attached to the concept unit you're currently doing. It's like just a lot of problems that they have to do. The portfolio problems, though, are like I said, like rich, meaty problems that are multi-step that you would use probably multiple days. Kids might be modeling something, they might be doing a poster, they probably have a math talk around it. Those are interspersed portfolio problems throughout the entire concept. A lot of the other pieces that other teachers use are very similar in terms of the strategy. So like look at the data, like who's going to need a small group. I mean, I think again, it's a lot of what you're probably doing. Like you've identified kids in your room who are struggling.
All of them.
Right.
I guess that's my problem is when I hear these things like, oh, you identify these kids that are not intentional non-learners or struggling learners, whatever the case may be. Identify them and then pull them aside in a small group. I've got 40 of them in a class of 40.
Yeah, then you're still in whole group.
So that's where I don't know what benefit does this give me.
Yeah.
Or I've got 5 kids out of the 40 that are ready to move forward, but I've still got 35.
And I think that's fine. Like you still then do, like the data would suggest to you that you're not at small group, you're not at small group workshops. Like that's just not where your classroom is. You're doing class because that's. I think that the key is here. The data tells you to do that, not just because it's what you know how to do. Like another teacher might actually, when they start looking at their data, say, I actually only have 15 kids that are really struggling. I'm going to work with those 15. But I guess what I would say is I would encourage you to play around with it. In the demo account, there's also curriculum. Like really look
and
at
that it's just that website you sent. Mm-hmm. There's no like secret magic login.
Literally, if you type in your email, that's it.
And that will have we can access all the curriculum.
Yes.
And this is what the student sees.
This is a student's end.
So they're going to see power and focus areas. They're going to see arithmetic, blah, blah, blah. What if they click on that one that's not done? Domain?
Domain. So this is a power
What do
focus
they click
area.
on?
They click on it.
What does it look like?
It tells them in this focus area. Okay. They need to be able to understand that a function has two sets, the domain and range, and each element of the domain is these are all the things they need to understand. And how would they do this? Objective number 1, understand that a function has two sets, and each element of the domain is assigned exactly one element.
And that's just a reading thing. There's
There's practice.
Reading practice. That's I wonder if it's a drop down.
Yeah. Everything.
What's that practice?
There's readings. There's I'm gonna open it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of this moves. It was like one category.
Kelly, thanks.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, we'll talk later.
Yeah.
Thanks. See you.
And you can, like I said, move. He is the district digital marketing director. Yeah. I could be wrong. Oh, good. Yeah. Think about it.
Mr. Sir.
He's the director of digital.
Did you see back on that previous thing where it had students able to help?
Oh, so that's a fee. Let me. Yeah. So here.
I'm thinking of like, does this replace Alex?
Is Alex a person?
No. So Alex is a math software that has. So we assign assignments in it, and they have like an individualized learning pathway that they're supposed to go through.
Yeah. So two things. So there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of bells and whistles and features.
The students.
Yeah. So when a student,
Tommy's good at this.
Yes.
His name would pop up there.
Well, he has to say it. Like, so if when the student passes this focus area, a thing comes up that says, "Would you like to be a peer tutor?" Click yes. If he clicks yes, then his name actually pops up on every kid's thing in this box. So that if you're in a self-directed learning room, let's say, and during mentor time, so the teacher really isn't supporting like kids learning, he can say, "Oh, like these two women, young girls, hopefully in the classroom, they're actually volunteered to be peer tutors. I'm gonna go and ask them for some help." So that's kind of how that is trying to help. Again, it's part of this agency, which is like, how can I be an advocate for myself? Okay, the teacher isn't going to be able to help me. The teacher is actually talking to someone right now, so I'm not trying to bother them. So, well, Jalen says, Jalen can help. Whatever systems and routines the classroom is set up, am I allowed to get a receipt? Let's say yay. I can go and ask Jalen, like, I really don't know how to do this. Can you work with me? So, but it's building, that's a habit it's building. You made me think of something. Oh, let me go back to the year page for a second.
This feels like a lot for them to navigate for a 14-year-old boy.
You'd be surprised. It starts in it starts in 4th grade. So you would be very surprised at how quickly kids navigate it. It's harder for the adults. It's harder for parents and then teachers than it is for kids. In my experience, they are so tech proficient and their minds are just looking at tech all day on their free time. Maybe not, but some communities. But they don't struggle. They don't struggle navigating the platform.
And that's my concern. How good are your students at navigating Canvas or Alex? We're still getting questions about how to find the pathway. Click on the button that says pathway. So, and we're 3/4 of the way.
But this wouldn't just be backwards. That's how it
Yeah, I mean that's one benefit is they're getting it in a variety of classes instead of one.
I mean, I would encourage you guys, if possible, just to like go to Farmington and see what it looks like.
Seriously, you can send us over there. Do you know? Are there any junior highs that are using it?
Oh, tons. Not in Utah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
There are tons.
And no elementary school.
Utah is one. Like Utah, I think I only have 3 schools in Utah.
And they're high schools?